Hey, everybody. Welcome to the TrailBlazers podcast. We're your hosts, Tyler and Dave.
So we're here to help break down the critical decisions, personal developments, and key factors that help get our guests to where they are today and contribute to where they will be in the future. So how are you liking it being back in Alberta now? Because for how long were you in Singapore for?
About a year and a half straight. But yeah, it's been pretty good so far. So even like last night, for example, I went over to my buddy Tom's house, one of my good buddies from my childhood, like high school too. And then his parents just got just like a baby golden retriever puppy. So cute. Like it's like 2 or 3 months old. It's just like a little bundle of fluff right now. Like, oh, it's so adorable. I got like I got a cute photo of it too. I could even give you a look. One sec.
Yeah, please do, man. That's cool.
Yeah, I mean,
that's an interesting thing. I noticed the difference between like North America and somewhere else is that there's way more dogs here.
Oh yeah,
that's cute. That's a cute one.
Cute. Yeah, but yeah, no, it's been pretty good so far. How about you? I know you've had a fun summer over there in Montreal.
Yeah, no, it's been good so far. There's been a lot of stuff to do. I've had a couple of friends come and visit. So we just and good weather too. So we've been exploring the city and, seeing everything and doing stuff. So it's been nice. I told you, I think I'm moving, in the fall here. So I'm excited for that. Be closer to the center of the city. So yeah, no, it'll be good. So yeah. And then I'm coming back at the end of August, to Edmonton to visit everybody, see you, maybe do some live recordings. TrailBlazers live. We're thinking about doing that. So that could be pretty cool too. Yeah. But Dave, just on that note, why don't you let us know who we have on the podcast today?
Yeah, for sure, Tyler. Today on the podcast, we have Megnath Ramesh, who was previously a software developer at Scope AR and VRAM, and who is currently at Waterloo doing a master's, I believe, in something related a bit more to like robotics and AI. So it's a pretty cool mixture between both. But Megnath talks a little bit about his journey between going straight from electrical engineering into software development right after school, and then as well what made him choose to go and do a master's, say, after 2 or 3 years of work experience. So I think you guys are going to like what Megnath has to share. And without further ado, here we go. And how about for you, Megnath? Maybe you can give Tyler like a little bit of introduction on kind of your background and your past so far, because I obviously know like more than Tyler does. So probably be good for Tyler to know a little bit more too.
Yeah, please, man.
Sure. So I did electrical engineering at the University of Alberta. I went through co-op, and I essentially realized, I liked technology a lot more, so I wanted to get into more software and robotics and all these the tech sector buzzwords, essentially. I wanted to know how to implement those things and try to solve different types of problems. So I started doing hackathons, and I slowly moved into the technology sector. I worked as a software developer for almost 2.5 years, and then now I'm in graduate school in software engineering, and I'm working on autonomous algorithms. So algorithms to do with self-driving robots, not cars, but like indoor industrial robots, and try to plan like paths so that the robot can complete a task in a fast amount of time. So that's kind of like my overarching background. And then if one want to go a little deeper, I was an international student, so I moved from India to the U of A it's almost been like 8 years since I moved. And I've been around Canada for most of my school and career. So been in Edmonton for 5 years, and then did some internships in Montreal, Calgary, some more oil and gas, and then I came back to Calgary for a robotics internship, which was really cool. And now I'm currently in Waterloo doing my master's in University of Waterloo. So that's where I'm at right now.
Yeah, I feel like
you have anything, Dave.
Yeah, you have a really interesting path too, Megnath. I really dig it, and like especially too, like I think you kind of mentioning as well, like previously, like coming from India and then like getting to spend like time around different points in Canada, and also getting to try a lot of different industries too so far, and really seeing what you enjoy. I think is really impressive basically. And I think, knowing you as well, it's kind of channeled you down to this path of probably moving you closer and closer towards your passions as well.
Yeah. And it's just like I don't know. It's just an enjoyable process so far. That's pretty much. I like the process of me getting there, and then like the more and more closer I get, it's much more fulfilling. So
for sure,
it's that way.
For sure.
I'm pretty interested. Well, you said a lot of things there that I'm interested in touching on, but kind of first and foremost, I think I'm interested to know what was it like, coming to the U of A and coming to a new country, and so like you have to start taking your bachelor's of engineering and kind of have that shock of first year with all this work and everything to do and stuff like that. I know for me, I was lucky enough. I'm from Edmonton, so I lived at home and I didn't really have to change anything in my personal domain. But were there some challenges and some rewarding experiences and stuff like that kind of intensified the whole experience of university on top of moving somewhere completely new?
Yeah, I think first year engineering was a lot more forgiving in terms of cultural shock for me personally than, for instance, first year graduate school. Because first year engineering, everyone is new there and everyone wants to meet different people. And there's a general expectation that there's going to be someone who's not from Edmonton because it's a big university and you have people coming from different walks of life. So that was a good factor for me to talk to different people about, because everyone was interested in life back in India, and there was a lot of questions. I was trying to fit in here as well, and I watched a lot of TV shows to try to build my English skills to a level. Like, my English skills were good, but I wanted to get it to a level where I can seamlessly converse with someone else. So I watched a lot of TV shows, and I asked a lot of doubts about like colloquial words like legit and all these different interesting words that I've never heard before. So I think that kind of set the tone for me throughout my university experience. I think it was very rewarding in the sense I look at myself now, and then I think it's a direct result of that first year when I was able to integrate with a lot of people, and then a lot of people were kind enough to at least say hi, and then it turned into lifelong friendships. So I wouldn't equate that experience to a new graduate student, for instance, especially a student in the pandemic, where you don't really see each other face to face, and your only connection is your course that you're taking, whereas the connection before was you're a new person in a new university, which is a personal experience, rather than now it's a purely professional experience. So you can't connect at that level, at the level where you can face to face, essentially. So it is harder now, but I'm glad I'm taking grad school instead of undergrad at this time. So
yeah. The last point you just mentioned there too, I met somebody, a Canadian guy here in Singapore, and I remember he said something to me, and he essentially was along these lines, is that the friendships and the relationships that you start maybe earlier in your life, so like you're mentioning in your first year of university, because everybody's going through some level of the same challenges together, and everybody's growing and overcoming those challenges, you can almost grow those friendships to like a stronger, deeper level in an easier way, he was essentially mentioning, because he's saying like as you get older and you get a bit more mature and a bit more advanced, like the challenges that come start to seem a little bit easier. Like maybe for say some of us now, like I know Megnath, you relocated to Waterloo last year, and then Tyler is also relocated to Montreal, and I've relocated to Singapore. But I guess after you've tried this like once or twice, like you've relocated once or twice, you're like, I know what I'm going to get myself into to this point, so it seems to become a little bit easier. And I thought that was quite interesting. It's interesting you bringing that up again too here in regards to basically the comparison between being a graduate student and a undergraduate student. One of the things I'm kind of curious about too is say, because we are going through the pandemic right now, and obviously it's been probably quite unique experience being in graduate school during this. Like, do you mind talking a little bit about, say, like some of the things that you think have kind of like worked well for you, like starting your graduate program during the pandemic, and like any adversities you have to overcome so far?
Oh yeah, I think I was thinking about that. when I was kind of preparing to come on the show. Especially one big adversity was switching context from a job to school during the pandemic. And in a job, you have this constant communication channel with your team, and you essentially, you know what state something is at. You know exactly what you need to do, or like steps that you've laid out in front of your team, and you know a backup plan. In school, it's kind of like you're taking courses and you're taking research. So courses and research are both very individual tasks for the most part. There are some team exercises that are being introduced, but for the most part, it's about your learning experience and your grade of your learning, essentially. I mean, at the end, that's the objective, right? So when you're in that silo and you have all these other brilliant minds around you, you have this tendency to think, and you have no contact with them, so you don't know if they're struggling or not with the same materials that you're struggling with, and you feel like you're the only person struggling with those materials. And I took a course which actually is highly relevant to my current research, but it's something that was entirely new to me when like 6 months ago. And that course really made me question why I was in grad school. For the first 2 weeks, I was very upset with my level of understanding of that course in the first 2 weeks. But in the first 2 weeks, you're not going to be able to get that level of understanding anyway. But it was just that silo of being in, well, everyone else understands it. Why don't I? So getting past that feeling was one of the biggest adversities I had to face when I started school during the pandemic. And I feel that other people during the pandemic, especially when you're coming from high school to university, that big gap that you face when in terms of learning. I think a lot of people do face that, and I'd say you should the way I got out of it was to progressively set smaller goals for me and to achieve those goals such that, after 2 months, I was able to look back and say, okay, I have actually progressed. Progression over perfection is something that kind of comes up a lot in grad school. You want to keep progressing. And I'd say progression is something that is important in any kind of learning process. Rather than perfection, you're never going to be perfect, but you can always progress. And the other thing is, try your best to network. And it's harder in an online setting, but at least you just message 10 people on Teams or something. And once you message it, you get some messages back, and then you at least form some sort of a relationship with a colleague where you can actually discuss questions with them, and you can discuss some doubts that you may have, obviously in limits of academic integrity, but at the same time, you do want that social experience in school. Otherwise, you're just not getting everything out of it, everything that you could out of school. So that's how I got out of it, and 3 semesters later, I think I've gotten the hold of it. So
that's awesome. Yeah, you're definitely doing one of the harder things in the remote era of learning, for sure. Going to grad school and taking on a very challenging topic, and then like you say, in the silos too. Because I always remember, you guys know, in engineering, you go in DTLC or the common areas, and you've got 10 people around a table, all struggling with the exact same material. Some people are there till midnight grinding it out. So there's a very visual, everybody else is struggling with this material. I can only imagine how challenging it would be, doing that all on your own and all alone. And that's something that a lot of first years are going through right now. But hopefully your tip on focus on progression, can help some of them out there. Something that I am interested in is, you got into your career and you had positions at a couple of different companies. So what was the motivation to go back for a master's degree? Because I feel quite often we see students will go straight from an undergrad to a master's degree, and not often will people get a few years in industry and then go back. Yeah, there's Dave. Yeah. So what was the decision-making process behind that, and how did you decide you wanted to go back for a master's?
Yeah, well, initially after undergrad, I wasn't sure if I wanted to do a master's. Mm-hmm. I actually decided that after 2 years of working. So 2 years of working, so how that started was, as I said, I wanted to get into tech, so I joined a lot of hackathons, and I was able to network with a lot of different movers in technology in Edmonton. So these were connections with a lot more connections than I have. And I was able to connect with them and show off my projects, and they were impressed, and they kind of referred me different paths to take. So I was working on this AR project. I picked AR because I thought it was something that was related to robotics, but something that can be intuitively built to solve a business problem. And there was another company in Edmonton that took interest in that. And what started as a networking opportunity became a job interview. So that's how I kind of got my job as my software developer. But my interest has always been in robotics, and especially the goal of using robotics in solving a huge global problem. And the problems that I find fascinating are in food production and in work. And also space. Space is awesome. So that's number 3. But food production and work, I feel like, are 2 major factors in our economy, in our way of life, essentially. And there's a lot of different changes that it's going through that can be affected by automation. I'm not sure exactly how it will be affected, but I know that automation and robotics can come into play in those fields. And when it does, I want to be able to, if I have an idea that can be implemented to improve someone's life, then I want to be able to get the skills to get there, or to get that idea to production. So that's my main motivation to come back to do a master's. And I think one big factor with adoption of robotics is the trust that people have on robots. Mm-hmm. And one of the biggest factors of trust is the ability of something to do what it's supposed to be doing. So a robot's automation algorithm is a key factor in someone trusting that system enough to put it into production to solve a very critical issue. And if that automation algorithm has some issues, or it can be improved upon with more sophisticated technology, then that's something that would need to be addressed. And I think that's where I see myself to be, and that's kind of the reason I'm back in my master's. And I think, like, you find your path in different ways. And for students who are looking to do their master's right out of university, you can find a path that you never expected to be, and like you probably find it in your master's. I found it in my job, or I found it even in my last year of undergrad, I would say. But you never know. And one of my mentors throughout my my career always said that your career is not made overnight. It's made through a sequence of steps that you've taken. And for me, my sequence of steps led me to do a master's at 25. Yeah. For some people, it might be right after undergrad, but then that's their sequence of steps. And you just want to find what really interests you and what you find yourself to be. So.
Yeah, there's like quite a few things that are kind of going through my head here while you're like a lot of really good information. One, I think mentorship, maybe we can touch on that a little bit later too, but even in my space too, like mentorship has been key to like basically expanding along. Then 2, I think what you're mentioning about, say, some people might find that path during their master's that they didn't expect like that. I think that would fall like right under my branch. Essentially, like I would have never chosen this path had I not done a master's degree. And actually, like before I even started a master's, I didn't even think about this path either. But I think once again too, it would have been interesting to see if I would have went and worked for like 2 or 3 years and then gone back for a master's. I might have already known in mind like what I would want it to do at that point in time. And then the one actually other thing that I'm kind of interested in too, Megnath, is when you started, I really liked when you were talking about basically like you just kind of like taking on the initiative to go and do hackathons. Because I'm sure like at the beginning that was a little bit maybe uncomfortable to some extent, you know, you trying to go and put yourself out there and like experience them. You know, on my end for that, I did something similar too. So I participated in some hackathons, and I remember at the beginning I was always a little bit scared because I thought, hey, you know, I'm not a software developer per se. I didn't take like a computer science degree. I didn't take a computer engineering degree. So I wonder if I participate in a hackathon, you know, like where am I going to fit within the whole mix of things? So, you know, actually where I want to bring this question is when you started your basically like transition from say like being like electrical engineering and doing your more kind of like traditional roles and then going into say like software development roles. Do you mind talking about like one, how did you start preparing yourself for this transition? And then two, I'm also curious, like, did you ever feel any forms of like imposter syndrome at all when you were starting these jobs?
That's a great question, actually, because I want to first address the imposter syndrome.
Yeah, for sure.
Just by a line and then come back to it later. Yes, of course. I think when you switch your career or when you transition to a new field, or when you try to develop your skills to a level where you see yourself to be, but you're not there yet, you're going to feel imposter syndrome, at least as a little bit. And I definitely feel that there's moments where, you know, you have that feeling of, you know, being a fraud and getting found out. But at the same time, there's no sign of it. There's no sign of someone actually saying that you're a fraud. It's just you feel it yourself. And I think that kind of comes from, it's kind of very interlinked for me, especially. And I think that people can find themselves to be in a situation where you want to transition, and then you have that want, but the ability to transition is a completely other thing. And then I would say the want is all that matters. Ability is something you gain over time. And just the lack of ability at one point in time is what causes imposter syndrome. But that's just my take on it. But coming back to the points of how I prepared myself, I think hackathons was number 2, but number 1 was finding an opportunity where you can actually test it out. You've seen all these different software projects, all the cool things that people have done, and I've seen that, and I wanted to try out a research internship, for instance, and it paid very less. This was my transition out of oil and gas, and oil and gas paid a lot more. So it was a tough decision, but at the same time, it was a decision that I thought would be best if I took it in school. So if I didn't like it, I can always get another job somewhere else. And I think like that's another factor as well. It's you have the want, you just have to just like get that opportunity to see or look for an opportunity where you can test it out. Maybe it's not for you. Most of the times, like if you have that want, there's a reason why you want to do that. So most of the times it kind of works out. So for me, that opportunity was actually in Montreal, where Tyler is right now. But it was in a research lab, and it was probably one of my worst work terms in co-op. I just barely got satisfactory, and that was because it was a very challenging position for me. I've never coded in like Linux before. I've never used some of the platforms that we used before. But I think that challenge was something that really made me come back to it, because it was something I wanted to perfect. And then that's what led me to hackathons. I wanted to try to go to hackathons and see all the different projects that other people were building. And this is an advice I would give to any new hackathon goer. Your first project is probably going to suck. And what you need to do is don't worry about it. Look at the other projects because they're going to be building some really cool stuff, and then try to build that in your next hackathon. And then once you keep iterating that, one day you'd actually find yourself winning one. Mm-hmm. And I was lucky. That it happened to me because I saw someone build a robot, and then the next time I tried to build a robot myself, and then it was hard work, and it took the entire team to do it. But we ended up doing really well in the hackathon, and that was also added motivation because you have that. You start with a want, and then you look for that opportunity, and at one point you get that validation to say, okay, so you're doing something right. And once that validation comes, you just keep working on it. Just keep building your skills. And at one point, you're 2 years into your software developer career, and you're actually looking to build on your skills. So I think it all starts with a want and like how much you really want it, and then looking for that opportunity, and then accepting the risk of the opportunity. It is a risk. You're going to be spending some time. You're probably going to be rejecting a high paycheck somewhere else because you're starting off as a junior. But you can test it out, and dropping in 4 months is something. It is a risk, but you've already spent those 4 months. But then it's about just trying it out, and then if you don't try it out, then if you get the opportunity, if you don't try it out, then that's going to be a factor that I don't know. I think testing it out is very critical in switching to that field you want to go into. So without that step, you're kind of still in the want stage, and at the point you're just making sandcastles in the air. So yeah, and that's kind of how I prepared, I guess. So it was that opportunity. It was searching for that opportunity. It came, and it was not a great opportunity. It was something that is low paying, but you just keep building on it.
That's super interesting. Yeah, you said a lot of things there that I feel like we could touch on, but it seems like, you keep picking things that are very challenging and hold like a high risk reward ratio, whether than you could, you've obviously started a graduate degree in a very difficult time. You go to the hackathons, you give up the well-paying oil and gas job. I'm kind of interested, like, what do you feel like your relationship with adversity is like? It seems like you've developed a way to keep on leaning into it time after time, and it's provided good, rewarding results for you. So it's like, do you more so enjoy that challenge now more than you did in the past? And, what would you tell perhaps a university student that's facing a little bit of adversity, how they should, what the lens they should view that adversity through is?
I love that question, by the way. That was a very good question.
Thank you.
Because I think dealing with adversity really defines, like, at least like the books I've read has said, dealing with adversity defines what your mettle is in what you're doing. And I would say my relationship with adversity, while I have taken risks in my life, it's not something I enjoy. It's not something that, I'm in an adverse situation, I'm in a stressful situation. It's going to affect a lot of things around me, right? And it's going to affect me as a person as well. If I'm pulling for a deadline, which I am actually this upcoming week, it's going to be stressful, and it's going to be adverse. And the biggest motivator for me in terms of dealing with adversity is it depends on the type of adversity. My adversities, while they are risks, it's something I can reel back from. And it's not only that, it's something that I am choosing to give it a shot. It's something that I know will make me better, but I just don't know it now. So it's a little complicated, that thought process, because sometimes you feel one way, sometimes you feel the other way. Like, I can talk about dealing with adversity, saying, "Oh, it's just going to be over. It's fine." But then, obviously, you need to focus during that adversity. But if you truly believe that it'll make you better, then that is something that can drive you to face that adversity, and it's going to be okay. That's at the end of it, you're going to come out of a better person, no matter what, no matter the result. In fact, if you have an assignment and let's say you didn't do too well, you now know exactly the things that you need to develop on or your weaknesses. And you also know what you do know. I think I don't remember the classes I actually got a really good grade in, but I do remember the classes that I got a bad grade in. Because that kind of gave me the vectors through which I shaped my career around. Some of the grades I got a bad grade in, it's probably, well, that's not for me, so I'm not going to do that. But at the same time, with the work that I did in Montreal, where I didn't do too well, that challenge, while I didn't do too well on, it's something that I enjoyed. So I know that maybe if I got a second shot that I can do it better. So I shaped my career around taking as many shots as I can after that. It's like Kobe Bryant missing a game winner in his first 2 games, but he hit so many game winners after that. He practiced, and there was a lot of adversity around it.
Shoot.
Injuries.
Yeah, shoot,
exactly. Yeah, and you just got to keep shooting. Like it. Without that adversity, you're never gonna change for better or worse. I'd say you have to face that at some point, and everyone faces different kinds of adversity. And unfortunately, there are people who face adversities that they can't reel back from. And I don't know much about how I would deal with that personally. But ones that you can reel from, or ones that you choose to face because you know that it'll make you better, you just gotta shoot for it.
Yeah.
I like the way you look at it there, and I think a way that I look at it in a similar sense is I think about it. I draw the analogy to kind of what I know in my life, and I draw the analogy of it's kind of like working out in the gym, right? Like if you want adversity, you know the weight you can lift that's going to put you under a lot of tension, but you're not going to injure yourself at the same time. So you can be very specific about the adversity that you choose at the same time that you know you're going to get stronger from it, and it's going to push yourself to a limit that you haven't been to before, but you probably won't get injured at the same time. So it's like I think like you mentioned, you got to be able to kind of choose your adversity a little bit too, and know what you get yourself into.
Yeah, and I think that's a great example. One good way is if you know that you want to hit a personal record in lifting, like let's say in 2 or 3 weeks, you slowly start ramping up the weights. So in a deadline in school. And this is something I would say I didn't do properly when I was an undergrad. So this is probably a double standard advice. I am implementing in grad school, but essentially you slowly start to work towards a deadline and build up the strength to say, okay, if I do need to have a lot of work done the night before, now I know enough so I don't have to do all that groundwork and be a lot faster and complete my deadline in time. So learning is a daily process you have to go through. And if you're transitioning into something new, then that's going to be like lifting, and you're going to hit that personal record one day. It depends on, are you ramping up the challenge towards that deadline? So that's also an important factor, I would say.
Yeah, excellent point.
In terms of facing that adversity.
Yeah, for sure. I think, it's like learning is its own journey, and we got to take some time in order to basically overcome the hurdles that are thrown in our way, and then, what will come up in the future. Megnath, the one thing that I think is, for me, it's pretty clear, like even from the conversations you and I have had before, even I want to say it was probably December 2019, we went out for a dinner, and you were already telling me at that point, I think you knew you wanted to do your master's like the upcoming year, and you were pretty certain about what you wanted to do it in. So for me, I would think you're somebody who has like a very good why. Like you're methodical and you're kind of decently planned out to some extent of like where you'd like to go with what you're doing. For say students or young professionals who are going through right now and they might not have a particular path that they want to follow or some type of thing that they want to do, would you have any advice for them to kind of uncover this why, or perhaps figure out, like where are some of my passions lying and something that I can do with my career after school?
That's very interesting, because I think when I met you, my why was very strong, but at the same time, if you had met me 3 or 4 years ago, I did not have a why. And one thing that I used was I just watched a lot of TED Talks and different types of talks that explained what the future could be like. And I knew that there was something, like with all the skills I'm learning in school, I want to be able to apply as much as I can to build futuristic technology, or now it's futuristic technology, but something, I just wanted to do something. And like something that is notable, or something that is cool, that I would be. Mm-hmm. And I was coming across this TED Talk on drones and robotics. And I thought, well, maybe let's try that route. I would say like it kind of worked out for me in my first shot. But, what if it didn't? What if I did not like robotics? Then there's probably some other why that someone really felt strongly about. And then that's probably where I would go. And so for students who don't know what their why is, look at other people's whys. I think like if you really respect someone, for instance, if you're a fan of Elon Musk and you want to build SpaceX rockets, I think if I was that person, I would start learning about rockets. I would start reading through the papers that SpaceX has released or published. And maybe that's not my cup of tea, but you start there, and then you look at someone else's why, and then one day you'd be like, I'm in the right spot, and maybe I can make this my own, and that's when you find your own why. Because usually there's a lot of people working on a lot of different things that you can relate to, and by testing out these different motivations, you can come closer to your motivation. That can help you drive the rest of your career. And I feel that I've been kind of working through it, but my search space was kind of closed down really fast, where the first TED Talk I watched, or the first thing I really wanted to kind of explore, became the rest of my career, essentially. Yeah. So I guess like I don't have a lot of personal experience to get to that, but I would say if that did not work out for me, I'd probably look at someone else who's worked on something else and maybe try going in that direction.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. That's good advice. And I'm kind of like you, is like I tried to just kind of search for what I wanted to do, and first thing I stumbled across too kind of became my why. But I continued to get feedback in other ways, in other areas of my life, and I feel like we've heard that from yourself and other people as well, that's really important. Another thing you mentioned earlier that I want to come back to that I think is also really important, that I realized when I look back on my journey, I had a lot of it, but I wasn't intentional about it. You mentioned that you had a mentor. So was that an intentional process? Did you approach somebody and try to like set up a formal mentorship, or was it something that just kind of fell into place? And what benefits has that held for you over your career path thus far?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, because I've never really understood the importance of mentorship until I actually started my master's. And like, while this person that I mentioned was my mentor for a long time, he really came to my aid when I started my master's and like advising me on a lot of different things. And I've actually had a lot of different mentors, and I personally haven't approached anyone to be my mentor because I've mostly approached opportunities and try to just put myself out there to do different things. And you form relationships with different people as a result of it. The mentor I'm referring to was actually my supervisor in one of my internships. It was an internship at the U of A, and it really stuck out to me. Like, no one has ever told me that my career would take a lot longer, and it'll be a sequence of events rather than an overnight fame or overnight realization that you want to do something. And I think it just stuck out to me because it makes so much sense. And I think the mentors that you remember are probably, they're just going to say the right things at the right time. And they automatically become your mentor if they do. And during my job, I actually went through, like, I would consider a lot of the employees that I worked with, or my colleagues that I worked with, were my mentors, essentially, because they taught me different things that I still use every day, even in my research, in my programming part of my research. And you learn all these different things from different people, and I would consider there's definitely some level of mentorship there. And you kind of want to pick knowledge from different places, and that is what really makes you you, and it makes your work as your own. Of course, when I say knowledge from different places, it can be construed to take whatever feels like you feel is right, which may not always be the case. Sometimes you have to take criticism, but you have to critically analyze why they're saying it, why someone is saying what they're saying. And I think, like, as engineers, you tend to develop critical thinking as one of the most important skills that you come out of your degree with. And it's about looking at all the different advice you get throughout your career and identifying which really suits the path that you want to take, and then talking to the person who gave that advice more and form that relationship that you can ask them questions later on in your career, because you're always going to need different sets of eyes or different sets of opinions about what you could do. I mean, you're going to choose your own path later on, but it's always good to have that feedback from people who really shaped you early on. So I think they become your mentors, and that happens organically. I feel it's tough to go out and like form your own mentor or go out and get a mentor. I know there's a lot of mentorship programs, and people there are very, very knowledgeable. But it's just not something I personally see myself doing. But you know, you find mentors in different places. So try all places, I'd say.
For sure. And I mean, in my experience too, I don't think it was until I started my master's program either that I really started to understand the benefit of mentorship. I think to some extent when I was a bachelor's student, like I had met people who kind of for periods of time were essentially like guiders or mentors, you know, maybe managers or whatnot. But then in my master's, I specifically, you know, like we were mentioning, started developing relationships. I started volunteering, and then through volunteering, like I was basically helping out at like elementary schools and doing these like elementary science nights through APEGA, so the Association of Professional Engineers and Geologists Association of Alberta, for anybody else that's listening that's not from Alberta. And then, so essentially through that, I met somebody who's like 12 years senior to me. He was an electrical engineer too. And then like slowly through us volunteering together, like once or twice a month, we developed a relationship. And then, you know, he essentially sort of started to become like an informal mentor to me at that point in time. And, you know, like I'm still like, I'm texting him right now, and this is already about like
I guess it'd be like 4 years almost after like we just met for the first time, right? So, and like he has had like a really good like influence on my life, and as well basically like my dealings through that periods of time. And you know, like you're mentioning too, I would say too, if maybe somebody is not so social or is not so outgoing, you can still join like mentorship programs. I also did the one through Apega too, and I met a really great guy named Ray, and he also, like, you know, we met probably pretty consistently for about a year and a half, and he always had great advice too. And so, yeah, like I feel like mentorship is it's a great opportunity. But yeah, Megnath, really want to thank you for coming on. It's been awesome. You know, we've had a great time talking with you, and I mean, like, I feel like I could talk to you about a bunch of different stuff, like autonomous algorithms, but maybe we can save that for another time.
For sure.
Right on. So that was Megnath. We hope you guys enjoyed that one. I really liked it. He was awesome, really dynamic, really versatile. He gave a lot of answers that I actually wasn't expecting for a lot of those questions. So I learned a lot in that episode too. A couple of the highlights for me were, you know, he spoke about how he had that summer co-op term in Montreal in a lab there, and he said it went really bad. Actually, he only got satisfactory on it, but it drove him to come back and kind of perfect that. And so that's what made him go into hackathons and then led him into software and robotics and where he is now. So, you know, you can see there's a lot of drive in that guy, and that, you know, if he doesn't get something right, he has to go back and perfect it. And, you know, it's led to a lot of career and life satisfaction for him so far. So that's why I really enjoyed it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I can completely agree with you on that too. I liked his approach of just kind of saying that it's better to start doing something when like the risks are small or like the risks are minimal. For example, you try to do something like a researcher or a software developer, like when you're still a student. Just because then, you know, you're minimizing your risks and you're getting a taste for it before you actually start your career and do like a hard transition at that point in time. I also took a few notes. So some of the other things I liked that Megnath was talking about was basically moving to Canada. So I liked his like transition, kind of like his thoughts about like how dealing with the transition of being an international student in Canada. Transition to grad school too, like how do you go from being like an employee to be like a good student in grad school, because he said like right off the bat it was also not super easy for him as well. Tips for succeeding in remote learning, like that's also really effective in today's day and age. I know we're saying maybe people are going to be going back to school in September, but we're not 100% sure on that yet. Motivations for going to grad school, like there was so much good content in here, as well as always dealing with imposter syndrome, which is something I still think a lot of us people in tech deal with on a really frequent basis too, when we're trying to like you know, build new products and acquire new skills. So yeah, I really appreciate Megnath's kind of like humbleness and openness to kind of like sharing some of his adversities that he had faced. It was really nice to listen to, and also have him as a guest.
Yeah, I like the point on the imposter syndrome one. He said, because we talked about this a lot with other guests, and I've kind of thought about this a lot too, but he said something that I had never really thought of. He's just like, there's no evidence of it. Like you might be inside all your head, your own head all the time thinking about it, but then like no one ever actually calls you a fraud. So, you know, after a certain amount of time, you feel strangely competent, right? So it was a good take on it. And then, the thing about moving here in first year engineering from India, he was saying, is that I would have totally expected the opposite. He said that it was an advantage, and like everybody is new in first year, and that it wasn't that much of a tough transition. And then he was saying how difficult the first year of his master's was, which is, I wouldn't have guessed that either. So lots of great takes from Megnath. It was a really good episode. And so if you guys want to follow us and have a look at more of the content, see more episodes with different guests, you can follow us at TrailBlazers Pod on all your favorite social media outlets, YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn, all that stuff. So that was it. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Have a good one.
Like and subscribe. Boom, boom. Hit that like button. Boom.